material. Because I'm a Quaker, a lot of my books are semi-religious oriented. And I say that because we don't proselytize. We don't tell you to join Quakers. We don't tell you to believe like we do. We don't go out and actively go door to door like some religions. We go in silence. So a lot of this is based on going into silence. And I was actually requested to send this manuscript.
Wow.
And you had 2 other books that came out during this period, Martin.
Actually, 2 books already.
Yeah.
And a 3rd one on the way.
And this is in 2020, guys. So
What's
I think
that?
let's go ahead. Is that 4 total in 2020?
What's that?
Is that 4 total books in 2020?
Yes, actually.
Yeah.
One was with, I almost forgot about it. Thank you. One was with Blue Light Press. And the other one was called Unexpected. A friend of mine said, why are you using a title like Unexpected? You're coming out with so many books. But it was, I thought it was appropriate with the material that was in there. And so I have that book, I have this book, and I have the next book coming out. So yeah, I forgot I had 4 books this year. It's crazy.
I have 4 I just sent out.
What's that?
I have 4 I just sent out. I don't know when that'll happen, but
There's a lot of them that are actually still floating around in the universe somewhere. So I don't know. I might have more. It's scary.
No, it's a wonderful thing to have, that kind of abundance of riches, and now we get to
it's true. We're lucky.
enjoy. Yeah, exactly. We get to enjoy hearing a reading. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Martin, and you just take it away. Read from that book. We're excited.
Okay, thank you everybody for attending. I do have some hearing loss. So some people might have to speak up for me. And a lot of times I speak up because I have a hearing loss. So, and it's not a bad one. I just mishear a lot. This first poem is called I Keep Trimming the Caterpillar Tree Back. I keep trimming the caterpillar tree back. And when I'm not looking, someone snips the top and ruins the area where white flowers would have been. The tree wants more light, less shade. I want flowers, a place for birds to hide and sing. Sometimes there are compromises. This is not one of them. I do not want to mow the snowdrops. I use excuses. They will die soon. The winter grass is too flat and brown. I'll get it done. This is not a compromise. My wife asked with the most wonderful smile, this is not a compromise. I rush about and make neat rows of planted beans, cut some slack in the mountain ash's heavy branches. This is a compromise. I promise. I want more smiles. When she's not looking, I stare at her. I stare when she's aware. I'm trimming the way light enters. It's unusual for me to mark the books because I don't stay the pattern sometimes. This next one is called On a Starry Night. Van Gogh entered that quiet place, the one where fireflies gathered in communion, the one area bounding with grasshoppers in his face as presence. He knew he was there, at the epicenter of released joy, where the worrisome day and concerns fragmented into powder smaller than yellow pollen. Above his straw hat, galaxies circled as ballerinas, such fearsome light. God turned his breath into brushstrokes. Vincent felt his body molding like bread dough, wearisome splattered out of him. There was no edge between the horizon and sky and God. He did not need windows to see more clearly. Challenged all day, birds have been trying to fly against the ferocious wind. They insisted anyway on getting to somewhere they needed to be. They ended up going elsewhere. Loss takes us to a place we don't want to be, hidden far from us, but it was always there, like those volunteer plants growing from last year's flowers. The unexpected is everywhere. We just have to look. This finding cannot be measured. It's hard to identify, even if we endlessly watch for it. Neither loss nor recovery is written indispensably in the sky for any layperson to see. There is no formula for how to handle loss, no set amount of time, no appropriate response. Each of us has to find what to do. Every situation being different, having different impact and emphasis. And the birds flew directly into the fierce wind. Awakening. The intensity of love, suggested William Stevens. That what was missing, that quickness. The more we feel when we love. Birds cascading like melodies. That is what is absent. The world opening a book of infinite pages, fully felt. Our hopes and barriers are the spine holding us together. We never know what to expect, but we're willing to risk it together. We waken to the sharp focus of this world we never noticed before, and it is blindly present. Moving through this landscape, we can almost touch the abstract shape of love. Some people sigh for the lack of love. Some take for granted the presence of love. Some, the lucky ones, waken to the gladness of love, holding that quickening like liquid mercury, like a bird trembling in their hands. I left the bed when my wife was still sleeping, bundled in blankets, the memory of her from last night shifting through my spine. I covered her again, kissed her exposed head, watched her snuggle into the curve of love. I am fortunate to know she was what was missing in my life. intensely. Well, yellow light everywhere, absolute and widening. Daybreak. I hear the distance calling my name. I cannot avoid it for long, but I keep it far away. The distance knows my name, but it's not my time to go. A new day is about to break. Here it comes as sure as it will go. What have I left to give that is still mine? Hear that calling? Pain scatters far in the wind. It is not that far away that I can avoid it. Day breaks, and so too does the heart. Here it comes. I'll give what's left. Was any of this really mine? Distance breaks down into now, and I say, not yet. I got more to go. Although the calling increases, I cannot avoid it for long. Can't keep its distance from me any more than I can control night or day. There is nothing insignificant in God's eyes. It was less than one hair on the donkey's back that carried Jesus, bearing that awesome weight. It was less than the flea told not to bite until the journey was complete, not knowing the journey would never be finished. It was less than one piece of dust on Jesus's sandal. In spite of that all, the palm leaf was one of many laid out to soften that harsh journey even for a moment. If only, if only, if only. How am I doing on time? Moderator, how am I doing on time?
You're doing great. I think if you are comfortable with like 5 to 10 more minutes, that's perfect. We're enjoying it.
Thank you. I was just going to read one more, but I didn't know what my time was.
No, you're fantastic. And then we'll just have more time for questions. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
April 17th. It's April. It's snowing again. And again, flowers close. Snow is such a cruel joke. The world is speechless, disappointed. All this unfulfilled desire. It is April, after all. It's not supposed to be like this. White, cold shock, purpose driven away. This peculiar weather, this unevenness, this lack of rapture. It's our turn, insist the purple crocuses. Snow returns anyway, any way it can. Death can happen at any time. We can only sing our way forward. The journey is long and the length varies depending on each of us. And when we get to the end, tired, forlorn, we will brighten up at last and open like spring flowers. Unfolding towards love.
I love it. That was, you know, and I like how suddenly the title of that book has a lot more weight to it, because there's a lot of organic, like unfolding is such an organic word that it makes sense that you would choose that. Martin, I was thinking of something, a phrase came to mind when you were reading, and it's simply, you're a student of wonder. A student of wonder, someone who really studies and has this awe about a lot of different topics.
Thank you.
That's just what I saw with you, so thank you. And I do want to read some of these compliments, Martin, and I will be sending them to you, but in the chat section, there's just a ton of them. Robbie said, where fireflies gathered in communion really spoke to her. I really like this. Sometimes there are compromises in how you played with that line. And it was that you have a lot of love poems, or poems that have a deep abiding love. And that's beautiful. Christy loved the way light enters. Love this breath into brush strokes. Wow, is what she wrote. Robbie wrote, he did not need windows to see more clearly. Yeah, that was a lovely line. The unexpected is everywhere, and the book of infinite pages. That resonated. And then Karen wrote a couple of things. So Karen, you were just pretty much typing the poems out. You can almost touch the abstract shape of love and the haunting, if only, if only, if only. Lovely. So I know people have questions, so feel free to go ahead and unmute yourself and ask them. If you are, okay, Christy already wrote, I'll do that. If you want me to ask the question, I will. So Christy wanted to hear about your process. And I told you, Martin, we were going to pick your brains about that. So
I'm not sure where to begin with process, to be quite honest. I write daily, and I don't worry about what I write. And I just write because the brain, like an arm is a muscle, a leg is a muscle, and you have to exercise. And as I get older, I worry running my family. So I think about getting the things on the page immediately and not worried. I go back later because I'm so caught up in the immediacy of what I'm doing. So I'm not worried if the poems are publishable. I'm not worrying if they're good or bad. It's just that exercise. And I don't have a set time. My wife goes to a doctor's office, I'm writing. I'm waiting at the grocery store in line, I'm writing. I'm got to a part where I have to wait for traffic to turn. I'm writing. I'm insane with how much writing I do. But there are also times when things come to me so quickly that I can almost spend a whole day just writing. That happened to me yesterday. I wrote 20 pages nonstop of individual poems.
Wow.
yeah, wow is right.
What's that?
So Christy said, wow. And I have to agree that you know, I'm pretty certain I just don't have that much to say. But I love I love how you're describing, Martin, is that your flow just opens up and you ride that wave, and that you think in terms of it being a muscle. And I would say, yeah, that makes sense. So that you exercise it every day and you don't micromanage the process. You just go and do it and enjoy the flow. You also, again, I say, a student of wonder. Yeah. And John asked another question, which I'm imagining, because I get the to know who your influences are.
That changes a lot. I started writing with reading things like Anne Sexton, and she was an early influence on me. You can't probably see that anymore, but she was.
Yeah.
Robert Bly was another person I read a lot. People that I have gone back to are like people like William Stafford. I can't get enough of William Stafford, and we share being Quaker. And we both share being pacifists and trying to do something as an alternative to war. I read Mary Oliver. I go back to all kinds of nature poets because they're the ones I seem to like the best. Wally Swift seems to be my new interest, but I have other people that I've read over and over again. I tend to have more women writers on my shelves than I do men. I have 10 bookcases, by the way.
Yeah.
And being a librarian, I'm very much into cataloging by alphabetical order, even the titles.
Yeah.
So it's insane what I do, but I'm influenced by a lot of them. And I go back over and over again. When I came back from Vietnam, I went to college. It had been like 3 or 4 years since I had been in high school. So I had a lot of ground to catch up on. And when you grow up Mennonite, you can drop out at 8th grade. So imagine how many years I had to overcome to get to college. I didn't even have a transcript for high school. So I had to take my GED and I had to do a whole bunch of things to get to college. But luckily, I pick up things very quickly. We were talking earlier about people that have the spectrum, and I'm on the spectrum. I see numbers like they're in front of me. I don't need blackboards. I don't have to do what's called break it down. I can see the numbers and I can calculate them in my head, and I can actually do astrophysics that way.
Wow.
I can understand string theory and a whole bunch of other things. And it all comes from the most unusual source of how I know those things. And that comes back to when I was working on my grandparents' Amish and Mennonite farm. Nothing was electrical, nothing. So everything had to be done the hard way or been done with some kind of way of accomplishing the same method. So we had something called a gravity-fed saw. You cut up lumber on the top of a hill, you have something that looks like a trough, they'll put the wood on top of that trough, and they'll let it slide down and hit a stationary saw.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's one of the laws of Newton physics.
Yeah.
So I had to calculate in my head the diameter of that wood, where to place it on the trough so it could slide down to get enough acceleration to hit a stationary saw and split that wood, or it wouldn't work. That's a lot of numbers off the top of your head to calculate. So I had no problem with that. When I was bored, I taught myself astronomy and astrology. So I knew the star constellations and the mythology behind them all. I got so intense in it, I went into Druidism and learned all the Druid stuff that is unusual to know. And then I was reading things like War and Peace before I was in 4th grade. So catching up was not hard for me. I was doing chemistry on the farm. And I didn't know it was chemistry until I took a chemistry class. I said, oh, well, I understand that. I took a botany class and I said, oh, I know what the Latin names of flowers and trees. Why am I going to learn here? So it was not that hard for me, but it was a very interesting experience to go through. And during all that time of going to college, I never had a creative writing class. So I self-taught, which means that I don't know what the heck I'm doing. And I do it anyway.
Yeah, I was going to say, but you know, much like you're saying, other experiences inform us. And I think, you know, I maintain my statement. You're a student of wonder and you wonder about a lot of things, Martin.
Thank you.
And so a lot of people were commenting. And so Robbie said, I can see the connection between you and William Stafford. And then John pointed out that Stafford also wrote a poem a day. And then Robbie had a couple questions that kind of connect in. You know, what's your relationship with revision? How do you approach that? And then also, she had questions about like, how did your family feel about you going to college? And, you know, when you were younger, how did you, it's interesting that you're a librarian, of course that makes sense, but where did you get the books that you came across that you started, you know, just devouring?
Well, I better clarify the question about books first. I had what they used to call a country mouse, city mouse lifestyle. During the winter, I lived in Syracuse, New York. I'm now 5 minutes away from where I physically grew up.
Oh, wow.
And every summer, well, actually every spring, I would go out to my grandparents' farm and plant. And then I'd come back because I had to come back to school. And then I would go back in the summer. And because I was doing so much of that work going back and forth, I had times of electricity, I had times of books, and I would take out books from the library and take them along with me and spend the summer reading books. And the librarians understood I was not going to have it back in 2 or 4 weeks. But I would bring them back, and I'd bring back a stack of books because I would read that much. I was reading Homer in 4th or 5th grade. They just couldn't give me enough books. So that's why where I got the books from. I want to go back to process a little bit to answer your other question, that I actually know how to play piano. And when I was a young child, I was like playing with classical music at 5 years old with the Syracuse Symphony. So I could barely reach the pedals on the piano. And I was playing Mozart, Beethoven, Chopin, you name it, I was playing it. And I got to a point where at some time period in my life, I heard Jerry Lee Lewis and it was all over. And then I wanted to do nothing but rockabilly, and I wanted to do nothing but swing, and I was playing barrel rolls and all kinds of stuff that is really fancy. And then I got so bored with that. By the time I was 10 or 11, I don't remember how old I was playing live radio. A lot of people don't remember that musicians used to play live, and I'm one of those people that played live. I had a chance to play in the Arthur Godfrey Hour, live music with a jazz violinist, Stephen Grappelli, who used to play with Django Reinhardt. And I was playing Django Reinhardt music on a mandolin. Somebody was mentioning either a fiddle player. It's the same kind of string structure. And I was not a normal mandolin player either. I was bottlenecking it like it was a dobro. I was playing it with a bow like it was a fiddle. I was tuning it as I was playing like a banjo player. I was not normal. And I did this for a number of years with different people. I hated bands. My first band experience was with a group called the Even Dozen Band. You can look this up. I'm not listed because I didn't last long because I hated the idea of a group after a while. John Sebastian, Mama Cass Elliott, and Maria Mama Abadado, who's now Maria Maldur. I played with those people, and their egos were so big, and mine is so small, that I just couldn't stand being in the same room with them. So I started going around and playing with different people at different time periods, joining in. You would call it a jam session, and I would just show up, and I played with a lot of people over my life when I stopped playing. When I came back, I couldn't hear the music anymore. I couldn't hear the tune, the mandolin. I put it down and stopped playing. But part of that process that I'm getting back to was typing like I'm playing piano. And my wife notices that I play that way. And I'm not looking at the keyboard, and I'm not looking at the word processor keyboard either. I know where all those letters are, and I'm just typing because I'm playing a piano. And part of that jazz is improvisation. So when I'm going along and typing, I'm making up the poem as I go along. And after a while, I actually see if the poem is going to be a 2-line poem, a 3-line poem, a 4-line poem, a 5-line poem, or no structure whatsoever. And it just occurs to me as I'm actually writing. So going back to revise is not that hard. All I'm looking for now is the fact that I really don't have very good grammar rules. I really have to pay attention to past, present, and future tenses because I don't have that in my toolbox. And I have to focus on that because I know that's a problem. I also have other types of fallback glitches that a lot of writers have. And I have to be aware what those things are that I have been doing for years and years and years, like a bad habit, and I have to break them. You see, I'm doing some sign language as I go along.
Yeah, I was just noticing that.
And I have to do that because it's a bad fallback. And one of the common mistakes I make is the letter it. And after a while, it's not clear what it is. What is it? So I have to go back and figure out, okay, I know what it is, but probably nobody else knows what it is. The other thing I have to be careful is I told you I have quite a few books written about religion. I read some of them to you tonight. And I'm trying so hard not to use God. In Quakers, we use light and presence. So you'll see those things popping up in there because that's some of my habit of talking and how I think about God in a different way. And I'm not thinking of God up there. I'm thinking of God everywhere, in every plant, every person, every rock, every piece of water, every animal, you name it, it's all part of God. And if you think about it in science, it's atoms and molecules. And where all this separates me from Robbie, from Christy, from Karen, from John, from everybody, is the fact that our DNA structures have created us to be different. That's it. The skin color is called melanin. It has nothing to do with whether somebody's better than somebody else. We're all basically equal. It's what we do that separates us from other people. And you find people that are very similar to you. I've actually met 7 people that physically look like me. And that's kind of scary. And when I was many years ago, a woman mistaken me from some other guy and came up and slapped me. So some
no.
other guy has gotten free and he owes me.
That's awesome. Well, there's some chats that are kind of dovetailing with what you're saying. So Robbie was pointing out, so now you're hanging with poets. Those are some egos sometimes too. And then she added that pronouns reference is a problem for lots of people. And then she had the same thing I did when you were talking about light and, your Quaker background. She said, that's where the wonder comes from, that, the wonder that I hear in your poetry. Kieran had a question for you, Martin. When you're writing poems every day, do you have a theme you're working towards with a collection in mind, or are you going rogue with whatever comes to you?
Half a dozen in one and two of the other. Sometimes I don't have anything in mind. I'm just writing. And then all of a sudden, I'm writing a second poem that's basically about the same poem. So now I've got a theme going on, and I'm not even trying to get a theme. I mentioned that yesterday I had written 20 pages. It turns out it's about 15 or 16 different poems. I'm not sure the exact number. I wrote them all, and they're all thematically connected. Mm-hmm. I'm going to have to let them sit for a while because I don't trust them. Mm-hmm. And that's where the revision comes back.
Yeah, that's what...
I will go back to them some other time, and I'll look at them and say, is that any good? And I'm not sure because, like I said, I'm not taught. I don't know my own poems, what are good and what are not. That may surprise some people. So I mentioned earlier that I was thinking of sending some poems to your magazine.
Yeah.
And I don't have that many to send out right now because you have this thing about being rejected. And so actually my turnover rate is pretty good. I can't say it's 100%, but I have a lot of them that get published in a relatively short time. So I think I have 3 or 4 poems. And then I worry, are they good enough to send to you?
They are. I'll just go ahead and tell you they are.
Yeah, send them anyway.
But we do have that requirement, and that's because I like rejects. Robbie had some good points too. And I like the immanence of the divine, but she added that none of us really, know, even if we're so-called taught. And you said you can have some of your poems that are rejects. Yeah, that's why I did it, because I had so many rejects. I figured there's got to be a place for these. So Kieran said, can you talk about your process for selecting a publisher for a collection? And that's a good question. So how do you choose a publisher?
Yeah, it's now putting me in an awkward position of answering. Quakers have a hard time with ego. So I'm very uncomfortable talking about how many poems I published and how many books I have and everything else. It's actually uncomfortable, believe it or not. So I know I have to rise to that occasion. So for a while there, I only had 2 publishers that I was sending to. Mm-hmm. Full lengths went to one publisher, chapbooks went to another publisher. And I wanted to stay with the same publishers. And then both of them died.
Oh, no.
One of them died in the middle of a manuscript. So I had to find another publisher. Then the other person died, and I had to find a publisher for that one. So it was very, very difficult. Yeah. Excuse me, I've been gardening all day. So anyways, back to your question about publishers. I do look up publishers. I do look up the people that they have published. Some of those websites give you samples of the poems inside. I love those. Some of them offer that if you pay a certain amount of money, you get a book from them. I love those people. I've sent to some of them. So I'm looking at who they publish. Do I know those people? And because I've made a lot of magazines, I see a lot of poems. So I'm thinking to myself, if I recognize a name, like Robbie, for example, I'm going to send to that publisher because I know Robbie's poems and I like what she does, and I'm probably going to like being in that publisher. Now, I do have one publisher that has published me a lot in the last couple of years, and that's Future Cycle.
Yeah.
And Future Cycle, I think I'm on number 4 or 5. Another one that's been kind to me over the years is Aldrich Press. And again, she's somebody that published me early. She's done to me a number of times. So I sent her another manuscript. In fact, she's one of them that I'm still waiting for next year sometime for it to come out. So I have those two people I know that I'm sending to what they look like. Now here comes the ego part that I'm avoiding. The last couple of manuscripts were actually requested. And that was very shocking to me. I don't think I'm famous. I don't think I'm well known. I'm pretty humble about who I am. And to have somebody say, can you send me a manuscript? Well, one of them was one of my publishers I had before. That's the one that's going to have my next book. It's called Deer Brook Editions. And it's about the days that I was doing farming. Future Cycle will be doing my war books. Not only my experiences in war, but also my attitude about past wars, that I call all wars are the same war. That's how I feel about war. So I look at it in terms of Quakers and we don't like war. We're trying to think about how to resolve conflicts. So we don't want to even know that wars exist, but they do. We can't avoid it. So I talk about that in that book. I had a person that published one of my chapbooks contact me about doing a full-length book. So that's next year sometime. And that was Flowstone Press. Now, the chapbook was a contest. And I won what's called the Editor's Award for that chapbook. So Flowstone was the printer for that contest. And they said, well, we liked your poems a lot. Do you have a whole manuscript? It's like, yeah, I have one sitting here. I don't know what I'm going to do with it. I'll send it to you because I hadn't gotten that far to send it out yet. So I can't believe I'm at that level at all. But I must be, and I need to realize that maybe I am and maybe I'm not, and not worry about it. It's not something to think about. But that's how I send manuscripts to contests or individual contests. I have won some of the individual contests. I've won 2 national chapbooks and 2 full-length contests. When I do that, it's the same process. I look into who they published. Would I be comfortable being published by them? And I have to look at the fee, because there's fees. And I have to take a chance, like anybody else, of being rejected. And yes, I do get rejected. And sometimes I get on the top 5. Sometimes I don't know. And I can't worry about that.
Yeah, again, that's that, the serendipity. And also, I do think it's important to point out what you're saying there, Martin, is that when you're doing your research, if you are reading the poets that this publisher has published and you really like them, you already know there's a simpatico, there's more of a connection. And that's what I tell people about magazines. If you go to Redheaded, Stepchild and you don't like any of the poems we publish, well, probably we're not a good match for you. You want to feel passionate about it. And that's kind of what you're doing. Oh, so Robbie has a question. So do you think you'll get sick of poetry and switch to something else?
I do have a bad habit of walking away from things. I got to the point where I couldn't hear the music. I had to stop. So I walked away. I was famous enough to be a session musician. So there were a lot of albums out there that I'm on one song, maybe 2. And I get no credit for it. None. I used to get residual checks at first, and then that didn't last very long. So I realized that I was not going to make money as a musician because I didn't want to be in a band. One experience was bad enough for me. I didn't need another one. So I was either a fill-in or a soloist, one or the other. And so I walked away. I was good enough of a painter to be considered for the Chicago Art College. And that happened to me at the same time that I got my draft notice. For some reason, I couldn't be at 2 places at the same time. So I walked away from that. I've been a number of years doing libraries, and if I talk about my library experience, you'd be surprised how much of it really wasn't a traditional library. I never was a traditional person anyhow. I was a children's librarian. I was a library director of 500 employees. I worked as a law clerk for a federal judge. I was a museum librarian for a period of time. I worked for the New York State as a consultant and trainer of trainers for small libraries, weird libraries like hospitals, museums, prisons, you name it, a lot of places. And I would go in and I would train somebody. And if they were a small independent library, I would come in and train those independent librarians. Or I would show up to board meetings to talk about library construction or library funding or something that was related to libraries. And I did that. That was my last job, was going around. And I went from one end of the state of New York to the other end of the state of New York. And along the way, it affected my health. Because they weren't putting me in top-notch hotels. Some of them were really on the edge of being called a hotel with roaches and broken springs and you name it. And it affected my health. That's where the asthma came from. So I had a breathing problem. It was so bad that I had to get they were talking about portable oxygen tanks for me. I had to do something to get my health back. So going on treadmills, I started working very hard on losing weight. And I'm no longer that level of risk, but it occurred to me during that time how fragile life is when you can't breathe. So this pandemic reminds me of that. And I think to myself, people are insane. there were times I was going like that.
Yeah, asthma is a very scary disease, and an asthma attack, is a very scary thing to see as a parent, but also to experience as a person. Robbie had
Excuse me.
another. Yeah, I saw that your throat was getting tight as you were talking. Robbie had another, and if you were here, I'd hand you a glass of water. I promise.
Yeah, that's the other problem. I'm not near water right now.
I was wondering if you had one next to you. That's one of the things as a host, I am of no use now. Robbie had another question about people on the spectrum, which, all of us, it's a pretty, all of us know someone. And she was asking, have you ever worked or thought about working with others? There's a lot of poets who are on the spectrum, a lot of writers. Oh, bye, John. We're sorry you have to go. John just said, I have to drop out. Great reading and discussion. Thank
Bye,
you.
John.
Bye, John. But so Robbie wanted to know if that's something that you've done or have aspirations for doing. Quite a few are poets. A lot, I mean, it's, the spectrum's a very broad thing, right?
Spectrum is a relatively new term. I'm not sure exactly how long it's been around. When I was going to college, because I'm really good at math, I was doing statistical research for all the college professors in exchange for college credit. And I would get a course in exchange for all the work that they didn't want to do. All the empirical studies, all the graphs and charts, sending it out to professional magazines with all the T-square numbers and everything else that they had to do. And one of my jobs was to go into the psych ward right here in Syracuse back in 1980. I still remember this year because it's the same year Ronald Reagan was president. And I had to go in there, and I went into what they called the worst of the worst. And they were doing free prefrontal lobotomy. They were doing electric shock. They were doing the old-fashioned, I'm trying to remember the name of that stuff, where they would bound you in a padded room and let you bang against the walls.
Yeah, seclusion, that's...
So my job was to find out if it was possible to diagnose any abilities that they had. This led to an actual published paper. So I would go in, I do observational, I'm trying to think of the right word, but I would watch what they were doing. I had a chart that I would score down what they were doing and what they couldn't do. Because everybody said they can't do anything. The object of the test was to find out what they could do, which was a positive twist.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember 1980 because that research that I had done was turned against us to set free people from the mental wards. And that's why we have so many homeless people. But I became very aware of the handicap problems, the different problems that exist in society with handling handicaps. And then I found out I had a niece that fell in that what they now call the spectrum. And she is, the common term for it is called snow blindness. And it means they can't figure out what that person knows. They're nonverbal. They bang against stuff. Temperatures don't mean anything to them. They could be standing nude snow and they won't feel it. They could be in the hottest water you can imagine and they can't feel it. There's so much they didn't know about those people. I took that on as an assignment. And I decided I was going to find a way for her to communicate. And I'm not sure what year this was, so bear with me. But what I did was something I called the talking board. And they still use a modification of this to this day. And every square had a picture on it. And it was based on Pavlovian idea that if they point at something, like a pitcher of a glass of water, they would get something to drink. If it had a plate, that meant something to eat. If they had to go to the bathroom, it was a toilet. And they had to learn that if they point to something, there was an action that related to it, that they were going to get fed, they were going to get something to drink, they were going to go to the bathroom, they were going to do all these different things. And they gave that to the Autism Society. And I did not take any money for it. I refused to take money for it. And I know they modified it over the years because they found out some of the squares didn't really work.
Yeah, I was going to say communication boards are used in a lot of different.
So you know about this.
Yeah.
I'm the guy that started that.
That's awesome. Well, I just realized that we went over. So we had a couple people that were signing off, Martin, that wanted to say thank you.
Thank you.
So Joan said, lovely poems, Martin. So I guess we should probably wrap it up. I apologize that we did not get to open mic.
I'm sorry.
Oh no, that's on me. That was my job.
No worries.
That was my job. So I apologize that we didn't do that. And so, but I have thoroughly enjoyed the conversation, and I really like that people got engaged and had a lot of different questions. And it was, Robbie just wrote, it was fascinating, and it really was. I kind of felt like Martin would have a lot of different topics that you were able to talk about. And as far as math goes, you should know, I won't even math in public. That's just a no-no. So thank y'all so very much. And Martin, I will be sending you the link to this and the chat section. And I know probably everybody wants to do what I want to do, which is I like to hear clapping. So if y'all want to join me in thanking Martin.
Yay.
Thank you.
Thank you so
everybody
much.
for putting up with me. I'm
Oh,
sorry
that was so
I took up your
delightful.
time for
This
open
is
mic.
great.
So if I had heard poems, I probably would have said something about them. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to take up all that time.
Oh,
Well,
it was
no, it's
so
not.
good.
And actually,
Interesting.
Martin, I was going to say, normally we have ahead of time had names, so nobody had signed up for it. So we're good.
Yeah,
We're very good.
this was so good. Martin, do we know how to get in touch with you to start hoarding your books?
His Facebook page.
I guess it's time to promote myself.
Please. Yeah.
I said that perhaps our host could put on there somewhere to all the people that join my email.
Yep.
And because I have a non-working website, because I don't know how to do websites, and I couldn't figure out how to update it, but anybody that orders one of my books, if you see the price on Amazon, I will not only sign a book, I will give you a free chapbook and remind me that I said that. If you buy 2 of my books that are full-length books, I will give you a third one for free. Remind me I said this because I'm very forgetful sometimes. And I make these offers because I got so many books I can afford to do this. I will pay for the postage. I will sign them. Let me know your name. The other thing is my email is also a PayPal. So people that do PayPal,
Okay.
please let me know you use PayPal, because PayPal's terrible about letting me know I actually sold something through PayPal. And then they use it towards my Amazon purchases.
Oh.
So I'm warning people about PayPal that they're not very good about letting people know. And,
Yeah, and
so
so-
I don't know if you do sell books yourselves, but I'm warning you about that you might not know that you sold something. But I offer these things, and I also hand in other surprises. You might get a piece of origami. You might get a broadside. You might get a mini chapbook that at the Origami Poetry Press does. I recommend anybody thinking about it. They only do 6 poems, And it comes in a sheet that you fold yourself. I'm going to show you. You have to fold it, and you have to keep folding it until it's a mini book. And I take these to the stair, and I just leave them all over the place.
Love that.
So it's a way of promoting yourself, and it's so inexpensive because all it costs me is a bunch of paper to take it out to the fair and just leave it at places. Normally, I'm the judge for the New York State Fair Poetry Contest, so I leave it in the building that has a display of the winners. They get prize money, they get a ribbon. I'm saying they get a ribbon, and they get to read their poem if they show up. They get tickets to the fair, they get tickets to park. So it's a really nice package. Top prize was $150, but you gotta live in New York State, unfortunately. But I do this because I don't mind hustling for other writers. I've done this project called Poetry in the Bus. Now the single one is me. It goes all over the county. Thousands of people are reading poetry all the time, riding on buses. I have a project coming up where I'm going to do postcards about people with cancer, and it's going to be available to any kind of those cancer rallies that they do, and none of them are going to be me. I did programs with ESL, same thing. Their poems are inside of buses bilingually in their own language and English. I love promoting other people.
Yeah. Well, speaking of that, I wanted to say I put your email in there. So everybody in the chat section, go ahead and make sure you copy it now. It's mwillitts, WILLITTS01
And remind me of all my promises.
All right. All right, everybody. Be well. See you next week.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody, for putting up with me.
Oh, it was a delight.
This
Good
was
night.
great. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Be well.